What's less fun that we have to talk about right now is all of the stuff that happened with Faker this week. If you guys are unaware, basically what happened was Faker post game one loss to Gen G was filmed in the studio during the review after the game, kind of smacking his head into the wall of the studio a few times before Gumayushi kind of pulled him away. It was obviously not recorded on the broadcast. This was recorded by somebody who was in the arena, who was taping him and then uploaded to social media. Obviously, this caused quite a stir with a lot of people concerned reasonably about Faker's well-being. Thorin, you on your Substack, which people can subscribe to, I Am Esports on Substack, wrote a long, in-depth article kind of breaking down the pressures of Korean culture and Faker's response to this. So what was your take on all of everything that unfolded?
Right, first of all, I will say that article is free. It's not one of the paid ones, but after 2 weeks, it goes behind the paywall. So if you want to read it for free now, go to iamesports.substack.com and it's on there. And basically, the reason I called this article Faker and the Cultural Double-Edged Sword is because what I actually tried to show people is one of the things I've tried to be preached the entire time since I got into StarCraft Brood War, which is, this is why you have to understand a little concept that, like, if anyone watched the LFN Culture Channel, that episode about the Phantom Thread, you will know what I'm talking about here. To be the greatest in a certain field and achieve certain levels of excellence, you might have to give up everything else, or you might have to give up things you consider dear to you or essential, or things that could not be given up, like family, friends, relationship. And so the point I tried to make was, even though the actual, extracted from the human experience, I think the output of Korean esports is peerless. Like, the joke is, as I've always said in League, the only way China can even come close, and they still don't exceed them, it's by having 1 billion more people. Like, that's no joke. Like, they just literally, use mass, they essentially used the Soviet approach to World War II. You used to have infinite bodies, keep throwing them until eventually you get some people.
Well, it's also, people have to remember that Korea only has a population of about 50 million people, and you compare that to the population of Europe, or the population of America, or the population of China, right?
It has one of the lowest birth rates in the world. So also, when you hear that number, they'll all be old people, mate. Like, there's actually not that many young people. So people don't realize, because I bet, right, when in that article I say per capita it's the greatest ever, some idiot will go, no, Denmark is like, bro, you don't understand the level of success Korea had then. We're not talking about just some good, we're talking about essentially when you stack up games they go hard in, they just get 80% of the trophies, and then all the greatest other teams of all time get the other 20%. If you lock into your G2 2019,
I mean, just look at the Olympics, guys. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the Korean precision sports athletes. So shooting, archery at this Olympics, relative to population size, the Koreans do very well at the Olympics, generally speaking.
Well, that's the problem. The reason why they do so well, I have to say, to most people with your bleeding heart, left-wing, liberal perspective in the West, is actually anti-human behavior and work expectations and what you would call exploitative behavior of workers, because basically their whole system, from their cultural ideals to what society approves and shames, to what your boss thinks, to what your family thinks, and eventually to what you think, because it becomes internalized eventually, essentially creates a scenario where the reason why they have the best winners ever, guys, is because that whole thing of Nike, winning is everything. No, their thing is winning is the only thing. It's the only thing. So as in, even if you are, and by the way, Faker's the greatest example, right? Even if you're Faker, you lose to DRX, you better cry because you're shit. They're the ultimate version of you're only as good as your last game. So what I tried to explain in this article is, this isn't just about Faker. To me, Faker, obviously, it's an excellent opportunity to put a spotlight on this. He, in theory, think about this analogy, guys. I've often given it this way. In fact, it's why I actually even used to say to people like Soaz, mate, don't worry that you don't win the tournament. You have a way better life, I promise you. Because I always used to say, if you're a Western star, think of I don't know, LeBron James or someone in that ilk, right? One of the things you all know is that, work hard, play hard, isn't it? He does his work, then he goes home to his mansion in LA with his 15 supercars and his family all there, and he's got a cinema room, and then he's playing pool with the boys, and then he does whatever. And the point is, because he's successful, one, we don't demand he wins all the time. We know he's only human. They don't do that in Korea, by the way. That's one thing they don't accept only human, like Matrix Reloaded or whatever. They actually really believe you should win all the time. And even if you're Faker, you will never get a break because you're expected to win everything. I always said it this way. If you win in the West, you're actually allowed by default to be worse next time because you just won. Everyone expects you to celebrate, cool off a little bit, maybe you're even a bit burned out. The expectation in Korea, which is really hard to understand if you're Westerner, is because you won now, well, you should just win every time. And if you're Faker, who, by the way, as I point out in this article, has a resume nobody can match, still not enough. Because you keep entering the server, you better keep winning. And so it means for people like Faker, I think the pressure it's impossible to even understand. I can only speculate. I think as an outsider, it is impossible. Think about if you did the checklist, right? He gets paid a king's ransom. So by the way, you know, on all these shows, we're all like, look, Faker isn't even the best. You shouldn't expect him. No, his paymasters expect him to be the best. He's supposed to be the most marketable winner. Then you add in he's Korean. The reason, as Monty's pointing out, Korea is so excellent at things is they also take like a nationalistic approach where it's like you're representing Korea. So if you fail, you failed me. I mean, I would say in the West, wouldn't every person go, fuck off? I mean, NBA people even do this on Instagram. They'd be like, fuck off, kid. Who are you? Like, I don't play for you. I play for the tickets or whatever. Bro, you could never say that in Korea. That'll be like the end of your career. And then as I pointed out, there's been some really bad examples of this where there's been like K-pop stars who just straight killed themselves over like too much fan pressure, feeling they failed. They didn't, the latest album wasn't as good as the other ones. So the point I got to was that this is actually a cultural issue, but then it's been actually highlighted in Faker because there's a couple of things about Faker, right? One, quickly to address the footage, Monty. One thing I think is disgraceful is that thread was just taken off Reddit immediately. Now, why? I don't know. What reason would that? Maybe they would claim self-harm or so. I guess there might be some real rule. If anyone knows, Reddit rules aren't real. They just apply them when they feel like it and they don't when they don't. So you can't ever see that video. It's already been suppressed, which I actually find really disturbing, by the way. If you're a Faker fan and you want that suppressed, you hate Faker. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Because if you don't let that go around, then it's up to T1 if they cover it up or not. It's up to them if they never do anything about it. But if he hadn't caught COVID now, maybe he'd still be fucking playing. Maybe he'd be in the match right now, losing and fucking getting stressed even more.
Does he actually have COVID, Thorin? It's the real question.
The obvious thing there is who knows, right? Who knows? Because it would be the cleverest reason to give right now. Because if you don't know, Korea still goes really hard at that. So yeah, that would be a very good, obvious reason to not have to acknowledge this video. Because if you say it's because of the video, Monty, what is everyone going to say? Which video? And then it's going to get linked to the thread. So there's that. And then also, as you say, another thing that annoyed me was people were acting as though, like, you know, someone snuck into the locker room and like, it was in the fucking stadium. He's just on the stage that he plays on. In fact, he's banging his head off that massive riot banner behind him, which, by the way, listen, Faker, I know you were just frustrated, but in a way, that could be like the greatest metaphor for what happens with pro players in riot games in some ways, because it was literally a riot logo. You were bashing your head off repeatedly. But I actually think the most disturbing thing is what people seem to have missed about this, Monty. This is why actually I thought Dom had a really weird take. He had that take of like, oh, you know, you shouldn't say Faker should be benched because, like, you know, maybe he's just like a winner and he's so competitive he wants to win. It's like, Dom, that's like when you get angry and you go, like Device did this in CS. When Australia stopped winning, if they lost the game that was really close, he'd go like, oh, right, that's a winner just getting mad. Bro, they had to pull Faker off. He was trying to just go like a cartoon, just repeatedly smash his head off the wall. It wasn't, he did it, I think, 2 times at the least. And then they had like 2 different people coming and pulling him away and trying to take, that's really disturbed. That to me, that's a sign of someone in anguish, mate. Or even if it was, if that's rage, well, that's also really unhealthy. We're smashing your own head in. Because I always think this. Bro, I've always said this, like, I don't even smash my headset when I get mad because it's my headset. What about my head? I wouldn't smash my own head. And as I point out in the article, the reason I'm concerned about this is, bro, I don't want to break it to you for the millionth time, T1 fans. Faker ain't winning off his hands. He needs that brain. That brain is everything right now. Do you know why you have a world? That brain. Do you know why he's done anything the last 4? That brain. That's the one thing you can't. This is the equivalent of Chovy just taking his hand and going, well, I lost the game. Let me just get this ball pin hammer out and smash each. Oh, well, just competitive, aren't I? It's like, no, that was actually quite alarming to me because I also thought this as well, Monty. For all we know, maybe this has happened before. This could have been something that's even, you never know. You never know how these things come out, right? I found the whole thing it was almost the inference was more disturbing than the act, you know.
I mean, the thing is, though, is that obviously not as high profile than Faker, literally the most high profile esports person in the world. But it's not like we haven't had players injure themselves out of being frustrated from competition.
course.
Like, what about SOAS? What about Oscarinen? Like, these players have actually done more lasting damage than we assume Faker was doing in that clip, because he wasn't
the
just
sickest
like,
one everyone in Fnatic will tell you if SOAS hadn't busted his hand, they were never going to put Whippo in. That actually literally caused SOAS' whole career to like butterfly effect downhill. Like he would have actually had all that success otherwise. So no, mate, there's been real cases of this course.
So, I mean, for people to act like this event is in isolation, I think is extremely weird. And like, I'm really surprised that I seem to be the only one mentioning these other incidents and saying, where was the concern for these issues?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there is a shock effect, both because it's Faker and because this was literally videoed, right?
Monty, but it was inferred that's also what happened with Oscarinen in fucking Fnatic recently in this last year. Yeah. It was, if you don't know, guys, behind the scenes, everyone just said like he injured it in a similar fashion. It wasn't that. It was just like whatever they claimed, you know, some like cover story. Which, by the way, notice, Monty, what I've just said there. People do cover stories. They don't tell you when these things actually happen. They come up with a bullshit reason, like he tripped over playing football, and like you look, it's like the most pale nerd ever who's got like monitor glare. And it's like, yeah, sure he did, yeah. Tripped over playing football, yeah. You got me on that one, yeah.
So I mean, there have been incidents. It's just that this one was obviously videotaped, and this one does include Faker. And I agree that it is messed up to look at Faker doing this, but there is so much, I think, to unpack and unwind around this. Like, the fan reaction was absolutely outrageous. People pretending that this didn't happen. I agree. It just totally puts the ball in the LCK and T1's court. And what we know, guys, is from the LCK will never do anything. That's what we know, because the commissioner is a ghost. There's like, despite the fact that this literally happened in the LCK studio, and you might think, maybe the sports league should step in here and see what's going on, or like assure the fans in some way. Nope, total radio silence. Maybe T1 should do so. Nope, total radio silence. By the way, this is the same org that has spent so much time trying to prop these guys up as K-pop stars to the degree that T1's CEO is in their Discord saying that they should take pictures of owner oiled up. They have actually, not only the CEO has objectified them, but they have intentionally allowed the fan base and encouraged the fan base to objectify these guys, to which now we get this wild reaction by the fans of blaming everyone else, trying to suppress this video, shaming other people for like posting this video or discussing this video, when really like the fan base itself has been incredibly toxic for the last few years, and objectively has probably caused more stress on the players and Faker to result in this situation than the things people are saying in English on a stream, which is what they claim is like the real damage. It is ludicrous.
Because, by the way, that truck thing, I think, also misses the point about what Korean culture is like, right? Look, from the truck ones that I saw, because often Invent Global would actually do reports about it, whenever they would translate it, it was nearly always about T1 the org, or, you know, we need like a different coach or something like that, or we're not winning. I've never actually seen one that said, like, Faker sucks, or kick Faker or something. Because obviously, at this point in time, like, at least, like, I have to figure 80% of T1 fans are just Faker fans. Like, it just feels like that's how it is. But what people don't realize, like I said, is when you pressure Faker's teammates and his coach and his org, you essentially pressure Faker. If you can't understand that, you're never going to get why you're the worst fan base in esports history. Because that means Faker knows he's not just playing a game of Corki or a Zay. He's playing so that like owner will or will not get abuse. He's playing so that his coach will or will not be told you should be fired and you're a disgrace to the Korean people. Like that's if you're Faker, you have to feel like that's on your shoulders. Like, bro, that is just owner, a guy that was nobody 4 years ago. Like, you're Faker in that scenario. You're going to feel like, unfortunately, I have the power to stop this in a way. So I think I think it has to be acknowledged that, like, look, it's not all T1 fans, obviously, but man alive, there's like as you say, it's not just that there's a large contingent in that fan base, but even worse, I agree. I feel like the org, and especially the Western people, have sort of played silly beggars, as we say in English, and they've intentionally like seemed like they're not dealing with that, but they've inflamed those people and they've made them entitled as well. Yeah.
Well, they've showed them that this is acceptable behavior to objectify these players, and they have, you know, ever since basically the joint venture between Comcast and SK Telecom, they have run a K-pop playbook, which, by the way, a lot of other LCK teams actually just think is a bad idea. Like, there are teams, you'll notice that this hasn't been replicated by the other LCK teams, like trying to push this kind of feverish fandom on people and objectifying their players and like basically saying, well, anything slides as long as you guys like love us. You can say whatever the fuck you want. Like, the fact that they never put their foot down even now is crazy to me. Like, they should be saying, we're dealing with this internally. Faker is getting the help he needs because they have the money to make sure he gets the help, right? That's why I think, this will be solved. Like, I don't think it's not an EG situation where Faker's fucking in danger, guys. Like, I don't believe that. Like, T1 is a significantly better org.
But that is why I also don't want it to be up to T1 to decide whether this gets dealt with. I want there to be some sort of a public pressure, because here's the difference, though. I will use an example from the EG story. I actually thought one of the most disgraceful parts about that story was when someone told a behind-the-scenes story that essentially implied at one point in time the EG CEO went into a room with Danny alone, and then they came out of the room and magically wanted to play again. Like, that sounds to me like coercion. You know what I mean? I can't know what they ever said in that room, but that sounds really disturbing, because in that scenario, I don't believe that CEO had the best interests of Danny the human. Oh, he's not even called
also,
Danny,
why would a CEO be in a one-on-one with a player about this stuff?
So
the power dynamic is
if you think
totally
that happens in the fucking EG, who, by the way, could never win Worlds, what do you think happens in T1, who, by the way, no matter how much you might think they're not that good now, if they get informed, they'll still be like a dark horse to win Worlds. Like, if you've paid all that money, you're definitely not saying what I say in the article, Monty, which is not only give him a break till playoffs, but if it's really bad, maybe he has to just have the rest of the year off. I don't even think they can conceive of that unless people are really concerned about Faker's health. If people are concerned about Faker's health, then they have to keep track of it. They've got probably have to, like, maybe even just as a token gesture, say he's got some sort of help or something. You have to do something like that. So that's why I do think it is important that people don't just take this as an isolated incident. It is so far, but I've just known too many times in esports where they do keep the genie in the bottle, as it were, and it just doesn't get out there.
Yeah. I do think that's true. And I do think it's outrageous that it's just the league and the team have just said nothing. Like, this took place in the LCK studio. Yeah. I think you do have to acknowledge it as a professional league. But as usual with the LCK, no one is willing to put their stamp of responsibility on this, because all of the people who are in the top of the LCK refuse to be public figures. And they don't want to do this because they don't want their names on this, because they're esports tourists. They're not actually here because they give a shit about LCK or a shit about esports. They are concerned about having their name attached to something that might be negative, because they are going to climb the corporate ladder and they're trying to get out of esports eventually. This is merely a detour on their career. And they have much bigger things in mind. That's how you can always tell who the esports tourists are, guys, because the people who plan on sticking around, or the people who actually give a shit, will take personal responsibility, and they will be out there and they will be public figures. And those that don't are the ones hiding behind the scenes so that their name doesn't appear in a Google search, because they're not planning on staying in esports and they don't want to question about their next corporate job that has nothing to do with esports about what happened. So, it's shameful. It's extremely shameful. And the LCK absolutely, the LCK, we literally went these entire off days. LCK is starting again. It's running right now as we're recording this show, and literally nothing has been fucking said. Nothing. Like,
by the way, go on.
No, I just don't understand if this happened in another sports league, why you would say nothing about this. Even if it happened in another Riot league, do you think if this happened in LCS, they would have said nothing about this? Of course they would have said something.
If I had to speculate, though, even if it's unconscious, the reason you don't address it is because of what I just said. This isn't an isolated incident. This is the best player ever who had the most success ever, and he's breaking down under the pressure. I've always said, Monty, the problem with the Korean scene is very simple. You know how in the West we all bemoan people like Dardoch, where it's like, he's so good, but then he never learns his lesson because you can't bench him, because you bench him and bring in the other guy like Greg. They lose the game, then you have to bring Dardoch back, and he wins the game and goes, haha, fuck you guys, I'm the best. And you always go, imagine if there was a player you could replace him with. Well, the problem is, Monty, that can go a dark way. Imagine there really is like an elite level mid laner or support. By the way, if we just go back 4 years, you can always find players who are like top of their role, who don't even play in LCK anymore, who play on the worst team now, right? Imagine if you really could just replace, not Chovy and Faker, they're at another level, but think of a really good player now. there's players that you can just take out solo queue that can replace that guy tomorrow. It might be good. They might be even better. It happens. So unfortunately, that means they, as an org and as a culture, don't have to learn if it's too much, if it's burning you out. If it's burning you out, no problem. There's 50 other people who want to get in here. They're all really good. They're all motivated. They're all playing to be the best. Like, unfortunately, that doesn't actually incentivize it unless you care about them as humans. If you're just looking at it as a sporting or a business venture, you're just going to do this approach. And that's why I always say, and I say in the article, like, the results are beautiful, but I actually think it's tragic, the reality of what caused those results and what allowed. Essentially, I would even give this analogy, because maybe this is a safer analogy since people are so removed from this one, Monty. One of my favorite teams of all time was when I got into hockey. Obviously, originally I was just watching the NHL, right? And then someone said, well, you know, when they had the Soviet Union, there was very few players defected. And so what happened was a lot of the best players in the Soviet Union played in the famous Red Army team that won all those things and famously got beaten that one time in the Miracle on Ice, etc. You know, that one. So that team is like one of the best hockey teams ever. Like, they had, like, you know, like it's exactly like a Korean team. They had like the telepathic ability to know where they were. They always kept the same lineup. They all practiced a million hours. I once watched like a documentary where it was about their life, Monty. Even though they were like one of the most successful teams ever, they just lived a normal life, as in, like, never had wealth, never had riches, because remember, in the Soviet Union, bro, a literal communist dystopia. And on top of that, they had like this Korean thing, like the early days of esports, where they were just grinded to death. Every day that it wasn't the tournament, they were practicing. And they were just playing like, they weren't even getting any time. So at the same time, it's the analogy that the guy in the NHL is, again, in the mansion with the sports car and the bird and the beer, etc. I've got 2 games till the game. These guys were getting ground to dust. So look, you might like the hockey they produced, but here's the problem. And this is a key point I want to make. It's one thing this is why we have to stop in some ways telling people, be like Kobe Bryant. Because, bro, that only worked for Kobe Bryant and a few people. And even then, I don't know what his life was like. Maybe it didn't work for him. Who the fuck knows? And also, notice how unfair that framing is. Because the reason everyone celebrates Kobe Bryant, Monty, is because he won. And he was the best. What if he'd been 100th best and ground himself down like that and had no social life? That would be a tragedy. And so the problem is, Kobe Bryant was never forced by his team, by society to do that. He chose willingly to inculcate that philosophy and then express it. In Korean culture, not only are you forced, like that example I gave of the Red Army, but also you've internalized that it's good to be forced, and you will force yourself as well. That's why I've told you. That's why I say it in the article. I think it's a pretty shrewd point. All of a sudden, it becomes a bit sinister, doesn't it, Monty? The way every Korean StarCraft 2 interview ended, cheer for me and I'll show good games. They don't even say cheer and I'll try really hard. They say, like, I promise to win if you cheer. Like, bro, that you can't live under those circumstances. Because as I said, if Faker breaks down, here's the obvious examples I'm thinking of. It's actually not even the guy who finished 11th, because he wouldn't, in theory, get all the pressure. So I'll tell you who has probably had the most psychological wear and tear ever in League of Legends. It's not, by the way, anyone you're going to think of. It's going to be people who were champions and champion level, but never did much more. So I'm thinking, I guarantee people like Peanut have been destroyed by this, bro. Think about what that guy was like when he came in. He was like literally like your little cousin. He was the bubbly little guy who had a smile on his face. Mate, because he's won so many different times in LCK with all those different things, be the MVP, he's been on T1. I guarantee this guy has had, I'll bet like some of those international tournaments were the worst weeks of his life, mate. I bet absolutely he felt like he'd failed everyone. I bet it was crazy. It's crazy, mate. People can't understand how, and remember, that should be like a top 5 Korean player of all time. That should be like a guy again who you'd think it'd be the opposite. You'd think he was living a charmed life and winning and MVP and money. No, because what comes with it? That's the problem. It's actually why I always warn Western streamers. Bro, I don't think you want to actually be the biggest streamer, because at that point, you get out of the sweet spot where you've got the money and the freedom and a little fan base. And you get to the point where it's the fan base that makes you want to kill yourself. So you get the millions, but you feel like you don't have a private life anymore. And then you feel like you have all this pressure and influencing kids. So they're the people I feel most sorry for. Peanut, Khan, Deft until he won. Like basically anyone who never won Worlds but was a truly great Korean player, they went through the ringer, I'm telling you guys.
Score probably had it the worst.
He's got to be up there too. I mean, the joke is he didn't even win Korea that much, so he probably had the absolute worst. If you think about it. Yeah.
He did bounce back and, win a little bit on Genji as a coach. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys. And look, I do think that this is also I do think this has been like overplayed right now, because ultimately, like, Faker is an adult man, and like he will know what is best for him most likely. And I'm sure the org is, I'm sure T1 is concerned. I'm sure T1 is taking action on this and talking to Faker. But also, Faker doesn't get to be Faker with his level of competition without being a little bit intense and a little bit crazy, and obviously very frustrated at losing, right? And so, unfortunately, the reality of Faker being as good as he is and having the longevity is that there's going to be not only this dark downside, but a lot of dark downside that you guys aren't seeing. And this is how it manifested maybe this one time. Maybe it's manifested this way many times, just not with a camera on him, right? We don't know the answer to that question. But just from what we saw, I am not too concerned about this because it wasn't huge. I don't think it did not look hugely damaging. It looked very frustrating, and that is just who you have to be in a way in order to be a massive competitor. And we also see this kind of footage all the time with professional athletes on the sidelines of events, flipping out and inflicting some level of self-harm or destruction, and it doesn't become this, I would say, this level of a lightning rod issue. And I think that the fan reaction of just being so concerned has actually also prompted the orgs to say nothing. And in my mind, this is another layer of the toxic environment that T1 as an org farms amongst their fans, which is that they just don't say anything, and they let their fans just suppress all the information for them. They let their fans like
shock troops,
troll everybody on the internet and be like, oh, poor baby Faker, we must protect him. And it's like, holy shit, guys, just say something. Say like, you guys need to stop doing this. This is, please don't do this. It is against Faker's wishes for you to be sending this video around, not our fans interpreting through the fucking tea leaves what Faker wants. So if Faker says that, and Faker tells the org, and the org says, hey guys, Faker would really appreciate it if everybody would like